the only natural resource is trust. And trust is dependent on honesty. And the reason that trust is the only natural resource is because if I can take you at your word, we can cooperate. And I don't have to worry about the snakes in your head. All I have to know is you'll do what you said you'll do. That means we can make a contract. Not only that, we can make one that we'll both understand it and we'll both keep it. And that means that we can cooperate. And if everyone's like that, then everyone can cooperate or even compete fairly. And if everyone can cooperate and compete, then every desert can bloom. And Japan is a great example of that. And so, Venezuela and Argentina, great counterexamples.
The Congo. Yeah, I mean, I think that picture that you're describing is the same one that Harvey Mansfield lays out in his wonderful book, Manliness, where he has 3 levels of masculinity. The first is weak men who are incapable of defending themselves and others. Manly men who are strong men who look down on the weak men, but will also abuse their power. And then the gentleman who has the power of the manly man, but keeps it in reserve to protect his family, his bride, his children, his family, his nation, civilization, but he's not going to abuse his power. So we've seen a regression where civilization was created by gentlemen, as you said. They became gentlemen. In the process of creating civilization, they become gentlemen, or in the process of becoming gentlemen, they create civilization, which is to say a society based on universal rules, on the view of humans as all equal under first God and then equal under the law, and that everybody has these fundamental inalienable human rights. This is the basis of what we call Western civilization, and it's a civilization of gentlemen. Well, we've seen a mass derangement, over the last 12 years, but particularly with the election of Trump, you saw a derangement occurring in every institution. And what happens with USAID is, and within the intelligence communities and the foreign policy establishment, is a massive derangement and abuse of power where the gentlemen stop being gentlemen, they become aggressive manly men, and they decide that they know what's best. And they can't stand all this democracy, which they call they dismiss as populism, and they describe populism as its opposite. They project onto populism totalitarianism, and in the name of preventing totalitarianism, create a censorship industrial complex, which was already we know was international. U.S., UK, U.S., Brazil, U.S., Europe, Canada, involved in it, particularly the Five Eyes, all coming out of the intelligence community because they're the ones that had run the censorship and disinformation operations, again, in Arab Spring and then the color revolutions. They turn all that back on the United States, first with the Russiagate conspiracy theory, this idea that Trump is secretly controlled through a sex blackmail operation by Putin. Second, through the dismissal of COVID origins. Then you see it with the Hunter Biden laptop, an elaborate conspiracy theory that the laptop is a Russian information operation as opposed to which they knew it was not because the FBI had the laptop 7 months earlier and used basically Jedi mind trick brainwashing to pre-bunk or program the journalists and the social media companies into thinking that a future story about Hunter Biden and Burisma would be a Russian hack and leak operation, and spreading disinformation in advance, programming people, and then demanding censorship on the basis of it. And I think we're going to find out a lot more about January 6th as well as a kind of construction rather than something organic. A clear decision was made at a minimum to not provide adequate security. We know that for sure because the Capitol Police Chief has written a whole book on it. And so you look at that series of events, and you also look at what the U.S. security state had done in places like Brazil and the Philippines and other parts of the world. And of course, this goes back decades. And it's a clear counter-populist effort run by these deep state organizations, run by people who had lost their minds, who have all the rational abilities, but they had Trump derangement syndrome and turned their enormous powers, their incredible psychological, sociological, political, technological powers against their own people to undermine democracy and attack free speech.
Are you tired of being held back by one-size-fits-all healthcare? Of having your concerns dismissed or being denied that comprehensive lab work you need to truly understand your health? I want to tell you about Merrick Health, the premier health optimization platform that's revolutionizing how we approach wellness and longevity. What sets Merrick apart isn't just their cutting-edge diagnostic labs or concierge health coaching, it's their commitment to treating you as an individual. Their expert clinical team stays at the forefront of medical research, creates personalized, evidence-based protocols that evolve with you. Unlike other services that rely on cookie-cutter solutions, Merrick Health goes the extra mile. They consider your unique lifestyle, blood work, and goals to craft recommendations that actually work for you, whether that's through lifestyle modifications, supplementation, or prescription treatments. And with a remarkable 4.9 out of 5 rating on Trustpilot, you know you're in great hands. The best part is you can get 10% off your order today. Just head to merrickhealth.com and use code Peterson at checkout. That's merrickhealth.com, code Peterson for 10% off. Stop guessing and start optimizing your health today with Merrick Health, because your best life starts with your best health.
Okay, so let's go back to the first part of that declamation. You talked about weak men and strong men. And so I want to just put a little twist
and gentlemen.
Yeah, gentlemen. Yes.
There's three levels.
I want to put a twist on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at what constitutes weak. All right. So if you look at the way that human beings develop neurobiologically, what you see is that from birth to the age of 3, human beings are basically, you could conceptualize them as, you could conceptualize the baby and the toddler as a sequence of instinctive drives. Now, drive isn't exactly a good metaphor because these systems aren't deterministic. They're more like personalities than they are like drives. But you come into the world with a set of motivations intact and a set of emotions operative. And so the motivations are orientations of aim, let's say towards physical contact, towards play, towards physical gratification, towards hunger, thirst, temperature regulation, the basic subsystems that orient you so that you don't collapse physically, let's say. And the emotional systems are basically positive emotion that attracts you to things and negative emotion that freezes you or causes you to retreat. Now, an immature person who is a weak person, let's say, because we're going to equate those, an immature person is someone who's still dominated by those systems. And so a 2-year-old moves from the domination of one motivational system to another. And it isn't till they're about 3 that they can start to integrate with other people. That's when they start to learn to play. Okay, so now the reason I'm saying that is because we can associate that weakness that you described. Weak and immature are the same. And they're the same as hedonistic. And they're the same as present-oriented. And they're the same as unable to delay gratification. And they're the same as narcissistic and narrowly self-centered. That's all the same. And like a variant of that would be criminal as well. Okay, now, one way of controlling that is with power. And that's the strong men that you're describing, literally the strong man. The strong man is someone who controls the hedonists with an iron fist. And then if you look at the postmodernists, the postmodern neo-Marxists, they would say that's the whole playing field. There's just power. There's just hedonism. There's nothing else. But that gentleman that you described, that's that integration that we were talking about earlier. That's civilized integration. And it is the basis of, it's the basis of mental health, I believe, which is quite a radical claim. Like you cannot, and I think you see this, for example, in the data that show that liberal, progressive young women who are like fragmented and hedonistic and immature, they're rife with mental illness, depression, and anxiety. They're dominated by negative emotion and have very little hope. And it's because they're not integrated. And so what the men that you described as gentlemen are actually integrated and mature. And their ethos isn't weak hedonism or power. Their ethos, this is something I really want to develop at ARC, and in the next book I'm writing, their ethos is one of voluntary self-sacrifice, right? And that it's voluntary. So the voluntary sacrifice is present to future, right? So you sacrifice the present to the future. That's control of delay of gratification. And you satisfy and you sacrifice your subjugation to your own whims to communal stability and productivity, right? And that's what happens. Kids start to learn to do that at the age of 3 when they develop friendships. They learn to delay gratification. They learn to take turns and to have friends, which is very much akin to delaying gratification. And that's voluntary self-sacrifice. That is the foundation of civilization. And that's central to the Christian ethos, for example, and it's laid out in the Old Testament writings as well, the ethos of sacrifice, let's say. And so I think we're at the point where we can actually understand this. And my sense is that a return to first principles is going to involve a conscious understanding this time of the ethos on which our civilization is founded. And I'm curious about your ideas about that. See, because I can't see how it can be any other way. Like, to be civilized means to be social, reciprocal, right? And to be social means you're not selfish. But then you might ask, well, what does selfish means? Well, it means you're not governed by your immediate whims. Well, then what are you governed by? You're governed by an impulse to integrate yourself internally with the future and with other people. And that's deeply enough embedded in human beings, so I don't think there's any difference between that and the instinct to develop and mature. And that's part of that hero's journey path, right? That's the pathway to maturation that produces that gentlemanly behavior upon which civilization is founded. And I can't see, how would you argue against that? Like, you could do what Foucault does and say, well, there's nothing but power. It's like, well, Foucault believed that because he wanted to rape little boys in graveyards and have that be okay. You know, I mean, he thought of power as the ultimate deity because he was trying to justify his own pathology. And there's plenty of that on the progressive and hedonistic side of the conceptual world.